this game in a way where it starts from education, our indoctrination system, which is huge, even when you're thinking about it for African countries, right? Because you had missionaries, you had colonials, and a lot of times those schools are still set up like that, right? And there's not any, I don't know, any university, any African university here in America or on the continent of Africa that actually centers around African people and Pan-Africanism. Most of these indoctrination systems in schools are emulations of what Westerners have told us what education should be about, and we've lost what our own education system.
I think that the European want to call themselves strategists, and they play a lot of dirty game, from blackmail to racket to scandal. In that they want to give you the position. Of course, we know that the election that they do in Africa, actually they are not an election. They do it so that people can be happy, because so that we don't say that we are having a dictatorship. But we see that it's not an election. We will see the recent one that happened in Nigeria, for example, where somebody will say, even though I lose, I will still be the president. Even though the people say they don't want me, I will still be there. But how do you do that? Now, what many Africans are also saying is that when we are having these people coming into power, we see them running around in the world, going to US, going to France, going to Germany, as if they are going to sign some document that we are not aware of. Now, after they sign this document, suddenly they become the president or the head of state. Then they start signing B in our names.
They're racialized, codified laws, and they don't apply to African people a lot of times because technically if you want to say that we're considered citizens, which a lot of times we're not, we're considered second-class citizens. And what that does is not include us in a lot of laws that discuss like liberty and freedoms and different things like that, which is why it's important that we design and develop our own systems, our own organizations that are governed by our own laws. I don't mean adopting someone else's laws and then saying, oh, this is our laws now. It's like, no, we have to develop our own systems, our own organizations, and our own laws. And these are all things that we've done before, but we've gotten into a stage where we've just emulated other people and what they've done in their laws and their constitutions, but we have to develop our own. My name is Nkozia, and I'm the author of Play the Game, Hierarchical Assimilation. I have also written 2 children's books as well called Ketia Noon Teleba, Morning Noon Light, and I Wish, which is a wishing tale for kids, encouraging them to make their wishes and telling them that they'll come true. I'm also an entrepreneur. I have a business called the United Association of Moors. We do social entrepreneurship, technological innovations. We're also in Ghana, so we're working really hard to create a research center out there. And yeah, that's a little bit about me. I love learning. I love education. I work with kids as well. So thanks for listening.
All right, that's interesting. That's lovely. There is a lot that need to be unpacked there. So we'll take it one after the other. Okay, so tell me a little bit about you. So why did you decide to write? Just generally, what do you love about writing? Since when have you been writing?
It's a good question. I have always loved writing. Like when I was in school, I always enjoyed reading and writing and like those reflective things that we always had to do. I remember one time in school, we had to read these letters from Frederick Douglass to the president, and we had to write a letter back to Frederick Douglass on like how we felt about his letters. And I remember being so upset at his letters because he was kind of conforming and assimilating in a way, arguing against slavery. And I just loved the power that had given me, even though Frederick Douglass is gone. It was just the idea of me writing that letter and in the same tone of that space. And I just really remember that. But I've always been told I was a good writer, so it's always been a passion of mine to like voice what I believe as well. So I think writing is a powerful tool. They say the pen is the sword. So a lot of times when we think about what's going on in today, we can think of paper terrorism as a form of the biggest way to do and commit cultural genocide is through writing.
All right, that's interesting. That's interesting. And what do you? Which part of writing do you love really? Before we move into your book, because we're going to be talking about your book today. Tell me, which part of the writing do you really enjoy the more as a writer?
I really love creative writing. So I actually have a blog that I started before I even finished my book. That I started maybe in like 2019 or 2020. And it's just a lot of different topics on things that I care about. So there's one topic I have on like the technological revolution that's happening in the continent of Africa and how there's a lot of big technocrats that's coming in to absorb the data, like things that people aren't really talking about or thinking about. I love to write about. But my book is more academic, which isn't so fun, but it does have a purpose, right? And I'm using a creative way to get my message across with the academic writing style. But I really do love creative writing because there's more you can say, there's more you can push, there's more ideas you can influence people to think about.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love that. I love that. All right, now let's pick up the book. Play the game. Let's start with the title. Tell me about the title. Where did it come from?
So this is it. Play the game, hierarchical assimilation. So it's really interesting because I I thought of the title because in the first few chapters, I'm actually talking about having to be an African woman and wanting to move up this social hierarchy in the Western world, right? I always had this idea since I was a kid that I would go to the best schools, the best high schools, and then I would go into the best colleges, and then I would go into the best law firms, and then that could create a space for me to like have my own law firm. That's always been this idea that I had. So when I created the book, I'm discussing having to gone to the best high school in DC and then having gone to one of the best universities in the country, United Air Force Academy, and how I had to assimilate within those hierarchies. But the more that I assimilated, there was a cultural stripping of my own identity that I realized that I'm talking about. But I'm talking about it from a personal perspective, but I also get into how it's more of a global phenomena that happens to African people the more they try to assimilate within Western culture. And so hierarchical assimilation is kind of the elongated, sophisticated description of that, but a better, easy way that we often hear it is we just say, play the game. You just got to play the game. You just got to get along to get what you're trying to get at. So I put those two together so people could understand a bit more context, like what that is to play that game.
All right. Now let's look at people who have not yet have a copy of the book. Okay, I just want to remind our audience that the book is actually available on Amazon, so you better get a copy for yourself. Wait a minute, let me see. So the book is available on Amazon, so you can get a copy for yourself and read, so you can follow along what we are discussing today, because I found that to be very important. All right. So what I wanted to ask you just now is. Are you like looking at the argument from the maybe having some element of immigration into it, looking at maybe Africa that are in the European country, Western country, or you're looking at it from the point of view of Africa who got to Europe through slavery, and therefore they are in the European society and they try to fit into the system. So I want you to help me clarify that part, because that can really be very interesting.
Yes, so it's more and I also say you can also find the book on my personal website, nkozi-a.com. It is a preference to use that instead of Amazon. But so yeah, so it is about the global diaspora of Africans, because my theory is that no matter what happens, if you're a part of the African diaspora and you go into the Western world, you're still going to have some form of stripping of your culture and identity. So I do get into it like no matter what. I kind of merge those concepts because I see it more as from like a Pan-Africanist perspective. And also I have witnessed a lot of Africans in different contexts. So Africans that have already been in the Americas, Africans that have traveled to Europe, Africans that are just coming from an African country coming into, and it's always been like similar stories. So I kind of merge those stories into one in what I'm writing about.
Play the game. I think I also like that very well. I remember a couple of years ago, I interviewed a historian. It's a Jamaican historian in the UK. So she pretty much gave me a very good description of what we are actually into. That in the European world, for most of us that are living here, or even for Africans that are in Africa, we need to understand that we are in a game. They are essentially playing a game with us, or playing game generally. In that, but she was saying that we need to know the game that we are playing. That as a people, we must understand the game that we are playing. That this is all a game. What the Europeans are doing, they are just playing a game with us. Of course, looking at it from a political standpoint now. Of course, that also made me remember when Haiti revolution started. The people in Haiti were really very feared. They could really defeat a lot of army that were coming around them. But one of the challenges that they had was that weapons could not come from Europe for them to be able to fight other Europeans. This, of course, explains something of what is actually happening in the global scale. That when the world becomes tough, they don't give you the instrument for you to be able to defeat them. So they know the kind of game that they are playing, that they want to win. Therefore, they do everything to make sure that they secure their interests, to make sure that they essentially win in the game, as it were. Now, as long as there is no country in Africa, okay, I'm already dragging the argument political. As long as there is no country that is strong enough in Africa to say, okay, I'm going to provide what you need. All African countries are treated as if we are just children, and we just need to obey. We just need to play the game according to their rule and play their own game, not our game. Of course, now it becomes almost logical that if you have played another man's game with another man's rule, there is no way you can ever win that game. You are not even close to winning the game at all. So this is where we are today. Talking of just the game, no? Of course, maybe that is a different angle you are treating in the argument, but I want to say that it is fundamentally important the way you title the work, no? Play the game. So the question is, what kind of game are we talking about? Do we understand the game that we are playing, if that is what you are actually also tackling in the book? Help me.
Right. So what I try to describe is the complexity of this game that we're playing in the beginning of the first few chapters, because there's about 22 chapters altogether. It's long. So in the first few sections of the chapters, I discuss this game in a way where it starts from education, our indoctrination system, which is huge, even when you're thinking about it for African countries, right? Because you had missionaries, you had colonials, and a lot of times those schools are still set up like that, right? And there's not any, I don't know, any university, any African university here in America or on the continent of Africa that actually centers around African people and Pan-Africanism. Most of these indoctrination systems in schools are emulations of what Westerners have told us what education should be about, and we've lost what our own education system should look like. So I discuss it as a psychological game that's happening first, right? That's starting as a child. And then I get into the workforce, right? So having to go into university and then planning on joining the workforce. But for me, I talk about it from, I was a lieutenant in the Air Force, right? So I was an officer at 18 years old. And so I discuss it in the workforce sense as like what's happening and the games that you have to play within that type of environment to keep that status, and what other people may go through in different workforces, and the gap that exists, the wealth gap that exists within the workforce. And then I'm getting into health disparities, which is also another game, environmental injustices, where you have these big tech companies and big companies in general that are going into these African communities and polluting them, right? So you have one place called, and there's a documentary on it called Descendants, But it's a town in Alabama called Africatown, where there was a group of Nigerians that were taken, I think, in 1807. And that was when it was illegal, right? And so they were taken from the area of Nigeria and brought to Alabama. And one of the people that come from there that Zerno Hurston documented comes from Barracoon. His name is Cujo Lewis. And they actually built their own town that's based off of where they had come from, and they call it Africa Town. And Africa Town still exists to this day, which is amazing, right? But the problem is that these large companies, like these paper companies and maybe other, I don't know, like chemical companies are surrounding the Africa Town. And so it's polluting this area and causing massive health disparities. And this isn't just an issue in Alabama. My mother's side is from Louisiana. This is also an issue in Louisiana where it's caused huge health disparities, diseases. So I talk about that game that's played and how a lot of times it kind of goes undiscussed or there's no solutions to it. So I talk about all of these problems and laying out what this game is and how we're not going to win at playing it their way. And then the last part of the book is actually the solutions, which for me, I theorize that it's us building together intentionally, like continuously building together, and mostly to migrate back to outside of America, like back to African countries, and building with the local people to invest in it. Because if we don't invest in those areas and build with each other, like Africans, African Americans, African Europeans, whatever the case may be, if we don't do that, then you're going to have these big white companies doing it, or these Western companies or individuals doing it. And then for you knowing, everything's gone. And then they have their hands entrenched in something else before it's too late. But my argument is that Africa as a continent has a lot of opportunity for us to redevelop our own society. And for right now, how systems and laws are in place in America and in European countries, it's not possible for us to have a safe environment where we can protect ourselves, protect our next generations, and build them in a way that we see fit with the current status that's happening. So that's kind of where it starts to go. So it goes into social entrepreneurship, building social enterprises, what that looks like. I discussed what my partnerships have been with people from Ghana and Tanzania, and trying to work together to do these social innovative projects. And so yeah, that's what I'm discussing, the problems and the solutions. And the only solution is unity, us coming together, which is a huge issue because of the divisiveness that exists within our communities. So.
Let's take a moment to look at again this as you were describing this African community in Alabama. I'm trying to imagine the different community that we do have across the world of African people that are living here in the West. Sometimes we do have this double-edged sword that at one time we try to protect our culture, therefore we sort of have our community that are living among ourselves. We don't want to sort of call it integrate or assimilate, but I think the English were having a different word for it. They call it association during the time of colonialism. Then the French, of course, basically do the same thing, but they call it assimilation. No? So the French sort of told their African colony that you are French. The English told you, okay, you are friends. we can work together. Of course, they are basically deciding everything. But the French said, no, you are part of us. So they are writing the rule for them anyway. Of course, neither the assimilation nor the association actually cater for the interests of the African people. That is just by the way. Now, looking at today, many communities across Europe, and I believe, let's just say across the West, you do have this situation where you have a society that look like Africans in Europe, but you do have some disparity, very huge in them. This, of course, okay, I said it's a double-edged sword, no? At one point, it helps you to be able to retain your culture. It helps you to be able to live among yourself, to discuss your issues and the rest of that. And of course, this is usually, there is no threat usually if what you're organizing a religious institution, for them is fine. No? But of course, when you start talking about political issues and all that, then you start having some infiltration coming in from the European. They want to become part of it. Those are just well, I don't want to say all of them, but they are usually spy because they want to see what is happening so that they can report back to the government who want to be in control. No? But if you are talking about church now, we are just doing the hallelujah thing. You don't have any, you don't represent any threat, no, because you are basically played the game again, no. So I am looking at this situation now. We're talking about the community, looking at the game. How do you? What is your perspective? I don't know if you have had the chance to look at this African community in the diaspora that I'm trying to describe here. I don't know if you have had any experience with them. Because sometimes, for example, just to give you an instance, this community that we have, there are a lot of poverty in them, very, very poor in the way they are. Sometimes they are even sometimes described as ghettos, as it were, known. So in there, not everybody that is of African descent really live inside this community. And so do go out and live in other area. They want to look like the European. They live that the European. They do what the European do. But there are these Africans who go outside maybe to work, but they return to this small, I don't know whether you want to call it ghetto or something like that. So thinking of the game that we are in, what is your take on that?
Well, I want to address something you did say about the French. The French do, and I don't know if there's another country that does this, how the French does it, but I know that the French does prioritize assimilation. So like if you are, I don't know, let's say you're Sudanese and you come to France, you're no longer Sudanese, like you should feel like you're French and like be French and like that's how you should refer to yourself. But I think that's a kind of like a way to create like, I don't know, quote unquote color blindness and like have racism in a more covert level. So even though you are technically French, there is still underlying implicit biases and microaggressions and racism that you still have to face, which can be super damaging and draining for an African person. And I've heard those stories and I've been to France and I know how it can be, especially Paris. And I know that it's similar in the UK as well. Like they have like European countries are very, racist. Not all of them, maybe, I don't know. But I know that I feel better back home in Ghana than anywhere else. But for your question, it's more so tailored for Africans who return back to their hometown or back to like this community that they've created that you label a ghetto. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. No, yeah. Correct. No, I was trying to see how do you see this community since we are talking about maybe how to build ourselves actually, because I do see that the African diaspora is a huge force as far as I can see, because we are hundreds of millions of people, like I often say. But sometimes we need to understand how does this community even work? The one that we want to call even our community. You can either look at maybe the African communities, many of them in Europe, European countries, Germany, France, Italy, UK, or look at the other one like those in the Caribbean, in Brazil, for example. There is no consensus among us to sort of find a united front. For this reason, sometimes the economy, even in this community, are not controlled by the Africans in the diaspora in most of the cases. So I am trying to see what kind of game is actually being played there. So I wanted to see what is your take there, because we can look at it from the point of view of economy, meaning the money that we go to work outside and we bring it to this community. Who really is controlling that money? Who is controlling the finance? Who is controlling the religion, the spirituality in this? Who is controlling the history, the narrative that is going on there? Who is controlling the information that is going in and out of this community that we have? And that is sort of what I know there are different dimensions to look at it, but I just wanted to see what is your take.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say I'm just thinking about when I was in France and I found like pockets of like African communities. And I would think that so one of the goals and solutions that I'm advocating for is for us to work for ourselves, work for our own communities, and build within our own communities. So basically circulating whatever wealth that we have within our communities that can help grow our communities and push our communities forward. And in some ways, I know that when I was in France, I can't remember like what neighborhood I was in, but I did see that. I did see like there were African shops and restaurants and us going there. But I think that we do have to like push it forward and do more. Like, and I think more in like the production field. Like, I remember going to I remember going to a African print shop, like not print shop, but like African like cloth shop basically. And most of those cloths were created in Europe, I think in France or Netherlands, or maybe came from China, something crazy. And it's like we have to, it's great that you have the store and you're selling it, but we have to produce our own African cloths because that's our culture, and that's very important. So I think that when we address the roots problems like those and become uh, economically empowered to do those things, that is when we start to have like more solutions. It's one thing to like just be in a community, but it's another thing to actually be producers in your community. And that's what I think we should be striving and advocating for in this day and age, for us to basically create our own game. The only way we can create our own game is if we're producing, not consuming, but producing. So that's the big.
You see, sometimes what is happening to the African diaspora is also happening to Africa and mother continent, no? But anyway, I'm happy that there are a lot of young people today who are sort of present online. But a huge proportion of these people that are present online are not really very conscious of the game that they are playing. You see, we always come back to the game again because it's always a game. For example, you are on Facebook. You need to know whether you are just a data or you are actually a contributor in the sense that you are having a voice, And because okay, you can have a voice, you can nearly have a voice, but still almost as a data leader, they give you they let you know what they are going to promote. So you promote it because that is what they want to promote. But yeah, they give you the equivalent money immediately. But the question is that how damaging is that to you and to the people that you represent? Okay, I mean, for example, if you go to Facebook now, you will see that a lot of Africa, okay, I know that other people also do that. They promote a lot of nudity at the moment for some years. And that is what is actually trending on social media. And a lot of Africans are doing it. You see a lot of women that are going naked. They get a lot of view, which is to say that the algorithm is promoting that, it's allowing you to get a lot of view for that because that is what they like, because they want to see a lot of people just scrolling. And we can see that just going naked have nothing to add to you as a person. You have nothing to add to your community as a people. But it appears that because you are getting the instant gratification just now that you're having this view, it appears that you are doing something really great. But the question is what if you were saying something reasonable, something interesting, something that can empower the community with the algorithm and also promote it like that? That is part of the game. We need to know that we are playing a game. We are having a role to play here. So yeah, the African people in the diaspora and also those at home, sometimes we are in a very delicate game that we don't know that we are in a game. But how do we begin to start deconstructing the game that we are into? Because until we understand the game, we don't even know that we are doing something that can even be harmful to us. We are just there because the algorithm like you. But do you know why he like you? You see, the proportion, the ratios of how many people go naked on the street, on social media, the proportion is proportionate to the African people. Maybe because they are new there or something, I don't know. But I've been reflecting on that. I'm sort of worried about it in terms of how we present ourselves.
Yeah, no, it's a huge issue. And I think the big thing we have to remember is that like racism and slavery, and I know people are like, oh my gosh, like slavery is over, racism is over, but it's not. It's being transformed, and like we're in this like new age of it being transformed in this technological revolution and digital era that we find ourselves in. So the sexualization of African women has been in its genesis, right, with Sarah Bartman from South Africa, that was taken and exhibited in like a zoo-like environment because of her body. So African women have always been sexualized, and I believe that that's still going on. Like you see that with like African American women, like they sexualize their bodies a lot to get seen and get promoted. But now, a lot of times, what I've noticed is sometimes a lot of African countries are looking to African Americans to see, like, oh, what's going on? Like, what should I do? And like, they're getting influenced as well in their culture. And then now you have social media that's becoming really huge in African countries. Everyone has a phone. Everyone probably has two phones now. So people want to like get a part of that community, and one way to do it is to sexualize themselves, is what they're seeing and noticing, and it is huge, very detrimental to our community, on the African, as African diasporans or as African people within our culture, because it convolutes a lot of different things, right? Because you have some African cultures where they naturally don't wear a lot of clothes, but they're not sexualized, and that's important. But if we become more engulfed in this technological revolution that is pushing these algorithms to sexualize our women, how does that change that culture? Is that question that I'm curious about. And so the algorithms are very biased, and it's doing something, and it's causing, I think, a type of mental bondage, right? For us to be so in tune with what we want to see on our social medias and that instant gratification, and to see what everyone's doing, instead of actually utilizing our creative minds and producing things or building things, right? It's consuming a lot of people, and people think that they can either get money from it or they can get attention from it. And that is kind of like the era that we're in. But we have to break ourselves from those types of beliefs. And I think that that's the most challenging thing when it comes to what I'm talking about with this game, is breaking this psychological mental bondage and chains that we have wrapped on our brain. Like that's the most difficult part. And then once you can get there, once you break them, I think you become more receptive to building, and more receptive to producing, and more receptive to working together as a community. But the mental bondage is really hard, and it makes it even harder with our digital devices.
Now, there is a lot of relevance to what you're talking about today and a time like this also. But my sort of concern is, how do we bring the conversation to the mainstream to help people understand that that we need to be conscious of what we are doing, because we are not conscious enough of what is happening. We are just like we are just statistics in the game. All right, now let me give you another example. You see, this happened also in the pop culture, no? In that there were a lot of music that were done that actually promote this over sexualization of the African women in the United States, for example. And what happened is that the people that are financing this music actually needed this. They wanted it to be this way, which is to say that it is not random. They knew exactly what they were doing. This over exaggeration of violence in the community, this exaggeration of just disrespecting our dignity. Let me just put it that way. That is what it really was. Just disrespecting, using kind of words that sort of tell you that you have no dignity, something like this. So it sort of go around and around and around and around, no? But where I'm actually going there is that, how do we bring the conversation to the open so that everybody can be talking about it? That we need to do something about what is happening, because sometimes people don't know that there is something wrong in what they are doing. Therefore, there is no need to think about it. You just keep on playing the game, the same old game every day. But how do we break out from there, like you're saying, so that we can reflect and then have a change of mind?
That's really interesting. I think the best way that I'm a huge proponent for is through education, like teaching ourselves, always being like eager to learn, and also teaching our young people. So that's really the only answer, and being consistent in that, being consistent in wanting to learn, and being consistent in wanting to teach. And that looks like, it doesn't look like just going to school. It looks like learning outside of whatever structure that you're in. So learning outside of work, learning outside of school, because a lot of information is not going to be presented to you, because, for example, universities are to develop you, indoctrinate you in a way that prepares you to join their workforce, that helps their large companies, and so we have to start thinking about those things. And the way that we think about it is to read more, learn more, and honestly socialize more. Like, it's important for us to find these types of communities and work together and build together and have these types of conversations, right? From a global perspective, and it makes technology makes it a little bit easier to do that, right? Like I'm in the US, you're in Italy. Like that's amazing that we're able to have these types of conversations with each other, and allowing for that network to grow, and more people are going to want to join in because people want to have community and like socialize with each other. So I think building these types of spaces, these safe spaces for us to talk about these issues, but then also building around it is the most like potent thing that we can do in this day and time.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me go back again to writing because you love writing, and of course this is evident because we're talking about your book today. Now let's look at the community because it's not everybody in the African diaspora or even in Africa that is sort of agree to this degraded way of living that sort of is worrisome, no? But for those other individuals who maybe know how to write, so let's limit it to writing, um, how is it to take up a pen and paper and put down your thought for the purpose of changing a situation that you don't like? In this case, now, what you are addressing, which is play the game. So, how easy was it for you? What did you have to do? I mean, I don't know if you want to share anything with us, like maybe your research, your journey in the writing. Please share with me anything that yeah.
Yeah, sure. So for me, it was crazy because after I left the Air Force Academy, it was like it was it was like a higher force, a higher entity. People call it God, Allah, Yahweh, was telling me that I needed to tell my story. I needed to write. And so as soon as I like started to get out of this fret of being in the military and having to like rethink about what am I gonna do, like how, like what's happening, um, which took a couple of months, I started to just write about it. I started to write about what I had experienced and like asking myself questions. Well, why did I experience this? Like, what's going on? And that made me even more interested in learning about my African identity and my history. And I kind of went down a rabbit hole in it. Got so engulfed in it, read so many books in it, like just fell in love with my ancestors, our ancestors that had written and articulated themselves so well as to what was happening, which really helped shape and put name to what I had been experiencing in 2018, right? So I was even surprised, but it was very, very evident. So once I had experienced all those things, I just kept writing, and it was just like, it just kept growing. Like my pages just kept growing. My word count just kept increasing. And I feel like I had finished it maybe in like 2 years, but the editing took some time as well because editing is can be a frustrating process. You have to think about what you want to keep, what you want to leave, like different style of phrasing, like if other people can get your ideas as well. So you have to have other people like reading it for you to see if they're grasping what you're trying to articulate in your writing. So that took like maybe another year or so, and then also like just delays in it because you always feel like there's more. There's a lot that happened in between me writing it and it being published. Like COVID happened, right? And I was like, well, I was finished, but I have to include what's happening in COVID because so many things was happening. So many killings was going on, right? There were even hangings, which is like a huge um, a huge part of our history is lynchings, right? Like I don't even think even to this day they passed the anti-lynching law in the United States, and there were lynchings during COVID, and people don't really talk about that. So there's so many different pieces of evidence I had to include in there. So it's hard. It's hard to like finally put it to a level where you're like, okay, people can read it now. But it's also an exciting process because you are curious as to what feelings and what actions will come out of people being exposed to this type of information. Because a lot of times, for some reason, and especially in the African community, we don't know because we're not taught about what's happening with us, and um, we're not given like what the name is and like what's going on and what theories are behind it, and what actions we can do to stop it enough. It doesn't happen enough. It doesn't happen in grade school. It doesn't happen on a university level. It happens outside of all of those paradigms. It doesn't happen at your job. So I think that it's very prevalent that this was needed, and it was needed in a way that I felt it would be easier for people to take in, to indulge, if they see like a young person that's saying it or something like that. So yeah, that's kind of my story with that.
All right. Now, when you say you're not sure whether anti-lynching, there is a law that forbid that in the US. I don't know if you want to say something more about that. If, of course, not everybody even know of what is even meant by lynching. So, if you wanted to say something more about that and how that might relate to the argument of the day, which is the game, the play the game, and of course, looking at the situation of African diaspora and African American in this case also.
Right. So lynching, what is a a horrible, horrific, terrific, like disgusting practice that happened. I want to say during slavery and even after slavery had ended, during segregation and up until now, you have some cases where people are lynched to this day. Maybe way less than what they used to be, but African people would be lynched if the most notorious case is Emmett Till. Emmett Till had been beaten to death and lynched, and a lot of different horrific things that had happened, because he had, like, it was said, but he was lied on that he had whistled at a girl, which was a lie that was told by a white woman. And white women would do that often, and it would cause for men to get lynched, but women would also get lynched. Sometimes children would be lynched, for different cases. Like maybe if it was a group of white people and they saw like an African boy walking, they would just want to lynch them, right? Because it was this violent nature, this inhumane nature that was in white people at that time, that was just like, well, they're not human, they're just property, like we can do whatever we want to them, and they would. So it's a horrific case, and something about that is, what was I gonna what the issue is with lynching is that it's still happening to this day, which is really, really disgusting. And there's like, it's just the violence though, like the violence that it entailed with lynching was and is something that goes untalked about. And also there's an anti-lynching bill that has not been passed. Oh, sorry. So that's what I was going to say. So with the lynching that goes on, something that's notorious is these postcards, right? And it's actually like a book on lynching. It's like $60. So it's kind of like a photographs of different images of people being lynched, which is interesting because it's almost like they're fetishizing it, like it's okay or something like that. Like I would think that book would be banned, but anyway, the issue is that white people would actually come together, like kind of like a social meeting, to kind of praise that they were lynching these African bodies and killing these African bodies. So it was kind of like having a tea party to watch an African person be lynched, right? And that is a part of history that oftentimes people don't like to mention. Like, you don't learn this in school at all, right? So it has to be something that you seek out information about. So it's a huge deal. Like the KKK, that was something. Ku Klux Klan, they still exist to this day. They were like something serious, right? They wouldn't just lynch you; they'll burn your whole house down with you in it. So the violence, the white violence against African bodies, was like no other. Like I can only compare it to the Holocaust. It's like the African Holocaust in different levels, right? Because you have the Americans, but you also have the Germans, and you have the Dutch, and you have the French, and you have the British. So you have so many different enemies when it comes to African bodies that we have to think about. So.
You see, as you're thinking, I'm trying to sort out some images related to lynching, so at least people can see what we are talking about here. And what I'm sort of worried about, or what I'm reflecting about, is that we are seeing these people who are looking at a human being being lynched to death, hung on the tree, and they are taking picture of it. They are rejoicing, almost like a kind of a trophy, like as if it's something that should be celebrated. And they are, after all, doing this in a country that want to pride itself as a democratic country, as a country that have the rule of law. And then we will have something like the Amnesty International, we will have something like the United Nations. And what kind of rules govern this country that allow things like this to go on? And as you say, so that I want people to understand that we are talking about human being hung on the tree, and we have other human being rejoicing over it. Uh, can we call this a civilized way of living? Animal could have done better than this. That you rejoice over the death of another person. I find it really disgusting. How do we do this?
Yeah. The it not only was the lynchings the disgusting part, but the cannibalization that happened with African bodies as well, which is a really good book called Delectable Negro that goes into it. But yeah, I mean, the issue is that these laws, the United Nations, and the laws that we have in each country state, they're racialized codified laws, and they don't apply to African people a lot of times, because technically if you want to say that we're considered citizens, which a lot of times we're not, we're considered second class citizens. And what that does is not include us in a lot of laws that discuss like liberty and freedoms and different things like that, which is why it's important that we design and develop our own systems, our own organizations that are governed by our own laws. I don't mean adopting someone else's laws and then saying, oh, this is our laws now. It's like, no, we have to develop our own systems, our own organizations, and our own laws. And these are all things that we've done before, but we've gotten into a stage where we've just emulated other people and what they've done in their laws and their constitutions. But we have to develop our own based off our own things, because something that is also the issue, like when we're discussing reparations or restitutions, that's what I like to say, because that entails a restoration that has to take place, which is an ongoing effort. It doesn't just end when you pay a bill. Is they say, well, it wasn't illegal during that time, so it's fine. But the Holocaust, when it happened to the Jewish people, it was legal for them to do. The president at that time had done it, Hitler. So you can argue that it was legal then, but when it comes to African people, it was legal, so there's nothing we can do about it. But you've done things for other people that has witnessed a human atrocity, like something that is egregious and like just out of this world, right? So that's why it's important for us to recognize when they say those things to us and be like, okay, it dawns on us that we have to develop our own systems that holds them accountable, because that's the only way. They're never going to be held. They're never going to hold themselves accountable for what they did, because it was horrific. It was disgusting. There's no words that can amount to what they've done, right, on so many different levels. And the problem that I have with it is that they minimize it so much. It's minimized and it's simplified, and a lot of people will like to say, well, that was so long ago. But we're in this stage of life where we see the consequences of those actions, of what had happened previously, and they impact the families that are the descendants of those people, but also from the continent as well of Africa. Like you can go to different towns where they had ports come in and taking people, and then go to those communities to this day, and you can see how prevailing underdeveloped those communities are, that had hundreds of thousands of people taken away from those lands centuries ago, right? And those connections are often made for some reason, because a lot of times people don't travel and people don't know and people don't want to connect those types of histories, but it's a huge deal. So
It's huge, and it's also disturbing. It should be disturbing, and but the one that I really find even more disturbing is that sometimes we Africans and we people of African descent, wherever we might find ourselves, we are looking for justice from these people. We are basically telling them, punish yourself for what you have done. But this is never going to happen. It's never going to happen, not even in a million years. The European law, okay, I say European, I often say European because those who have played the game here are Europeans. Otherwise, if we look at the real Americans, or the real people who should be called the American, they should be the Native Americans. And that is why we also say African American, because we look at people that are coming from Africa who find themselves in America. Then the other people who find themselves in America also, other than the Native American, are the Europeans. So the Europeans are doing this consciously. They know what they are doing, and they are using every instrument to make sure that this is the way it is for them in their game. And we, as Africans, we are telling them, oh, we are going to play this game with you. One day, you will repent. One day, you will realize that what you have done is wrong. No, they are not going to realize it. They will never realize it.
Right.
That is where I think the game become really complicated. In that, like Selena, the historian I interviewed in the UK, was saying that it's complicated for the African people because we don't understand what is happening. We are giving little sugars on our mouth and like little goat. We are just it's sweet. No, you don't understand what is happening. That sugar is made with your blood. You need to take your time to reflect, to see whether you are going to desist from not eating sugar today, from suffering today, so that you can be free tomorrow, or just eating a little sugar today and you continue to suffer for eternity. Because these guys from Europe, they are professional. They know what they are doing. They are not making mistake. And what I really find very I don't want to say whether it's challenging or so, when it comes to politics, African European politics, is that many European politicians, they go to Africa, the African politicians, of course, they corrupt, which of course are actually working for them in every respect, because in Africa, we never really have independence. Now, this individual, they will give them money, of course. They give them everything they want, but they give it to so few individuals. Because Europeans do not have money to give to the whole of Africans. Of course, if they give to the whole of Africa, they will become poor. That is obvious, because we're talking of more than 1 billion people. They cannot feed the 1 billion people, no? Of course, they can feed it, but they will mean that, you know this scale, no? If you put two objects like this, let me bring myself in full so you can see what I'm talking about. You see, you weigh it. These are two, no? This is Europe, this is Africa. You cannot give half of what you have as a European to Africa. It means that you will be poor. And you are not fair enough to play a fair game. Europe, I say Europe because I'm putting all the West together as a people. Europeans are not ready to play a fair game in Africa. They cannot play a fair game, because if they play a fair game in Africa, Africa will overrun them very fast. So the only game they can play in Africa is the corrupt game, where they decide the game they want to play either in Paris, in Vatican, in London, or in Berlin, or in Berlin, and they go to Africa and say, oh, this is international. But what do you mean by international? You decide in Paris, the people in Washington agree with you, those in Canada agree with you. You are the same people. You are the same. You are making the same vote. You see? Now, Africans cannot get justice in a European court. Dr. Ben was saying that the only thing that Africans can get in a European court is just this. Just this is not the same as justice. The only way you can get justice is if you can have your own rule as Africans, or you can play the European rule, the European game, but you are going to rewrite the rule so that you are in charge of the game that you are playing. The Chinese are doing this, and of course, the Europeans look at them as evil, no? But of course, they go back and they do business with them, no? But in Africa, you don't even have any country to hold. We're all infant, little children. You were talking about the African print before. I think one professor that I know was saying something about the infantilization of the African people. In that the cloth that you are referring to, the African print, actually is printed in Europe. And that should even be surprising to people. If we call this one African clothes, how come it's made in Europe? The cloth should be made in Africa, no? In my place where I'm coming from east and south of Nigeria, we do have African, we do have Esan print, but that Esan print is designed in Esan and is actually a different kind of clothes, no? That you use hand to make it, no? That one is not made from Europe. You cannot make it from Europe, but now they also make it with machine. I don't know, maybe they also make it in Europe now. So what I'm trying to say is that the game, I like the way you titled the book, Play the Game. We need to understand that we are playing a complex game designed by somebody and they are not sleeping. Their eyes is wide open. We are the ones that are sleeping. Take it up. They have not slept. Since the day of colonialism, Europeans are keeping eyes on what is happening in Africa to make sure that they don't lose. But the question is, what about us? Are we playing also so that we don't lose?
Yeah. We don't understand the game that we're playing at all, because we're not taught to understand the game. We're taught to, the reason why I said play the game is because that's often a phrase that we say amongst each other. Once we get into this Western world, and we're uncomfortable and we don't like it and it's frustrating and it's stressful, something that we say amongst each other to keep each other going in a system that is depreciating at our own selves is to play the game. Just play the game, right? So we're encouraged to play this game that is detrimental to our own lives, is what the whole concept of like saying and wording it like that is. And that's the issue. So a lot of times people want this white picket fence, the US dollar that is fiat and based off of nothing that has frivolous value. We want to play into all of those different things because we want to have what our white counterparts, Western counterparts have, which is this facade that they've created. And that's the biggest issue. And that's a part of the mental bondage that needs to be set free is we have to prioritize what it is that a valuable life looks like for us, which for me and my belief is that it looks like producing and developing within our own environments and protecting those environments and building and creating those social enterprises, which is really, really important. But we don't understand that game because we're not taught to understand that game. We're only taught to work within that game and to lose at that game and to think that we're winning at that game because we gain the fiat dollar. Oh, look, I'm a millionaire. I have $1 million, but it's like that has no value. You know what has value? The resources that's in Africa right now that's being exploited that you don't even care about, right? So it's like we have to reframe our thinking, not only because we're Africans, but it's because it's like it's humanity, right? It's inhumane to continue to work within a system that exploits other people and profits off of their ignorance and profits off of their lack of resources because it's being taken, or like all of those things. It's horrific, and all of us become accomplices to our own oppression when we do play this game. And so that's what I'm describing. And the only way that we don't do that is by building with each other. But it's scary, right? Because if you do that, then there you talked about infiltration. There can be infiltration that happens, death. A lot of people are scared of death, but our ancestors were never scared of death because we knew that we will always live on and continue because we are the majority. But death is a huge factor for people who want to build, but then also the discomfort. A lot of people don't want to go back home because they think it's uncomfortable, and also because of the corruption that happens back home. But we have to hold those individuals accountable for the corruption that they're doing within African countries. Otherwise, they're going to continue to do it, and we have to make an example out of them. And I think one way that that can be done is if we have more attention within the African diaspora, looking back on African countries to be like, you guys need to do more. You have to do more. And there's more people that are coming now to where there's more eyes on you to make sure that there is like checks and balances in place. I really see that vision, and that's the only way. But no, we don't know the game. And it's sad, right? A lot of people don't even know little simple things that we talked about in this conversation. It's new to them. They have no idea because of the indoctrination that they've been given, but they know about George Washington. You know what I mean? So it's an interesting thing.
But what do we stand to really lose if we were to stand up for ourselves? In that now you look at you look at African people in Africa, over 1 billion people, all of us just treated like children. We cannot stand up for ourselves. We cannot even do simple things. By simple things, I mean um, several years ago, hundreds of years ago, when the first Europeans started to come to Benin, ancient Benin, it's not even that ancient Benin, because we're talking of only a few hundreds of years ago. There was a street light in Benin. Okay, street light don't made with electricity, the one that we have today. The city was so designed, it was straight. The guy who went there, the Dutch guy who went there, said that what he was seeing was like what he was seeing in Amsterdam. The streets were straight several hundreds of years ago.
Yeah.
Those were designed by the Benin people, the people of Benin. But the same people of Benin today are living in what the Nigeria call potopoto. Potopoto in the sense that the road is full of pothole. Then you have very few people who have very expensive car. And their cars are jumping into the pothole, jumping, and very soon the car gets spoiled. But all of you are, it looks like all of us are children. Because if you were not children, you will understand that you are not rich. Because you cannot be rich just because you have a big car that is going to spoil the next day. If you were rich, you will repair the road. Then you will have more people that are rich. Then you will ride your car. Your car will last several years. Then it will be good for you. If you were rich, there will be light in where you are living. But if in the neighborhood, you are the only one that have light, everybody around you is poor. You are the only one that have money. You see, this is the thing that is happening in the Nigerian infrastructure, particularly in the housing. Before, when we were children, you could play from one house to the other. Everybody, we are just playing around, no? But now, you can't play from one house to the other because there is a high erected fence. Every house in Nigeria looks like a military camp. Everybody is afraid. But who are you afraid of now? What is going on here? What kind of game are we playing? What happened to the fraternity? What happened to the idea that we are our brother's keeper? That we used to leave our children to the next neighbor to take care of while we go to the farm. What happened to that one? I think that the game that we are talking about here is that there are some people who play the long game, very long one. That is the one the Europeans are playing with Africans. And the one that the Africans are playing are the short one, a game of maybe 5 years maximum. But you are going to lose because you can't live and know for 5 years. When other people are playing a game of 250 years from now, they are sowing seed in Africa that they are going to reap 200 years from now. We are hundreds of millions in the diaspora. I don't think there is even any government in Africa who say, how do we tap into you for the betterment of this country, whether you are looking at Congo, Nigeria, Ghana. I'm not talking about how to bring money. Money is not riches. In Africa, we are not lack of money. What we are lack of is the organization. Because if we are lack of money, we would be seeing a lot of Russians coming to Africa, a lot of Chinese coming to Africa, a lot of French coming to Africa, a lot of Americans coming to Africa, a lot of English coming to Africa, a lot of Canadian. The flight that is going to Nigeria is always full. They are not going there to beg. They are going there because there is money. So we are not lack of money. We are just lack of the organization. Having to understand the game that we are playing. What game are we playing?
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, and the another thing that you point out is ancient Benin, but they were very developed, and a lot of what I know of who recorded it was a lot of Arab speakers often documented how developed African civilizations were, ancient African civilizations were, and down to the organization, right? Down to the social organization of the law. Everyone had to know the law. Everyone was like well educated. They had legal systems. There was like order that happened. Like if something unjust happened and you go to someone, there's a community, like so many different things that there was like well organization, even down to like the buildings and the roads. So it is interesting to think about how do you go from that place where you're the most developed civilization maybe in the world, because you even know how to travel amongst different countries to different continents to where we are today. It is quite jarring, but they say there's nothing new under the sun. So it is something to think about. But of course, like everyone knows that Africa is the future, like period. But it's like, but who is going to dictate that future? Is it going to be Africans, or is it going to be the Chinese, or is it going to be the Russians, or is it going to be the Europeans, or is it going to, like, who is it going to be is the question. Because the wealth is all there. The wealth is like the most wealth is in Africa. So I just hope that we do see a time where we are not playing the game, but living our lives in a way that we are able to safeguard them, protect them, and live freely and happily, like as we're meant to. Because it's quite jarring to think that we live within this game and this system. And it's not just like African people, it's everyone that lives in this game and this system where we have to have this system of hierarchy that exists, social hierarchy that exists if you're like poor or wealthy. But why? When we were ordained to live on this earth, and the earth is free, the land is free, we have water, we have fruits, we're able to farm ourselves to be producers of our own food and learn all the skills that we need to survive. So why do we have to play this game in the system where some people are poor and some people are rich and some people are suffering, and all these different things? It doesn't really make sense when you think about it, right? This whole system and structure that we do live in, the social structure, it's very it's decaying. And
absolutely, because we have really like tried different kind of system. We can see that perhaps the one that we have now, capitalism, where I think it's also a very faulty in that we predicate too much on over consumerism, where we just deliberately consume something that we don't need. Like, okay, we just rip up resources that we are not going to need. Now, what I often say is that human being, even though we place ourselves as the highest chain in the animal kingdom, we are not the only ones that are living. You never see a lion to go and kill a zebra just for the sake of killing. You don't. I never see maybe the eagle just fly from the sky and pick a chicken that is not going to eat. You don't do that. That is against the rule of nature. Because you are supposed to kill because you need it. You are supposed to eat food because you are hungry. There is a lot of wastage that is going on with this system. The system is not healthy for us. The rule is not favorable to not just to the African, to the human being, because we are over consuming the earth. Okay, I don't believe that, that everything is going to finish in the next year. That is not what I'm saying. But we are supposed to be responsible for what we are doing. The water we drink, the overplastification of the planet that we have it today. It's not that we are doing it because there are no alternative. It's because we are just in haste. Let's consume. But the question is, where are you hurrying to? We have been here for a long time. We're still going to be here for another long time if we manage ourselves very well. I did a video a couple of days ago. Anyway, I don't usually even do those kind of videos, just talking about the planet Earth. That it is for us that we should be responsible. It's not because we want to save the world. In the world, in the sense, it's not because we want to save Earth. Earth, we just change one rules. Human being will disappear from wherever we are. We will be gone forever. It will take probably millions of years before we can form again. So it is for us that we are talking about, let's be responsible with what we do. That is not need bombing people for the sake of killing. What do we need all this for? So that game is not working for us. It's not.
It's not. Yeah.
All right. So we're moving towards the end now. So I would like to ask you about the solution. We have discussed this different point related to the game, the relationship between Europe and Africa. Again, I'm saying Europe. I'm actually looking at the West and Africa, but the West, of course, predominantly are European. So for easier clarification, Europe and Africa. So the relationship. So what do you see as a solution that somebody can take home from this book?
The solution that I discuss and emphasize is unity. We have to focus on unity, which I know is the biggest setback that we have as African diasporans. Is we're so nationalistic sometimes about where we come from, not even not reminding ourselves that those borders were created for a reason, and oftentimes even like African countries' histories are distorted and they don't even know like their own history. But so the biggest thing that I find as a solution is to unify, be able to go to your brethren like or sister and learn from them and be open to learning, and be open to building with each other and seeing where that takes you. I think also another one is traveling. I think it's important to travel and expand our minds and our socializations outside of where we grew up, because a lot of times people get stuck in the environment that they were raised because they're shaped by it. So it's important for us to travel. And another thing is it's important for us to become producers, right? Like everyone has a skill set. And I know business and entrepreneurship can be difficult, but that is the biggest solution, is for us to step away from being consumers and go back towards being producers. And it can be on a small level. It can be of growing a garden and start growing like some vegetables and some fruits, or learning how to sew. Like, I don't know, like so many different things, because we have to take a step back from consuming from our own oppressors to this day, right? And then another one is we have to think about the longevity of our lives and the protection of our lives. And I am a huge proponent for going back to African countries. I laugh because like this is a very ancient like what do you call it, campaign of go back to Africa. But I really think that's the solution. Like you feel so freer, you feel better, you feel like there's opportunity to create the world that you can feel safe in. And I think that Africa still has that ability, but I think that it's going to be beneficial on both sides, right? Of African diasporans coming back to Africa, but also for African locals, and for us to like work together. And it's going to be difficult. It's not something to romanticize, but it's about paving that way and developing those efforts of growing business, whether it's like having farms, because the agribusiness in Africa is a huge issue now. Like you have a lot of nonprofits, usually Western nonprofits, going to African countries and ruining the soil, right? So it's important for African diasporans to come back and helping with research and developing new ways to rejuvenate that soil and to grow product, because sooner or later, if we keep allowing for Westerners to come in and destroy Africa, it's going to be it. There's not going to be enough ability to grow food. So that's like a huge issue. So many different things. I think that if we come together, solutions can be resolved on both ends. And so that's what I'm a proponent for: social enterprise building, going back to Africa.
All right, that's interesting. It sounds workable. But what are the challenges that we really face there? Just now I was saying that I'm happy that a lot of Africans are on the internet, because the internet, again, have become the leveler for a lot of people. The goods and services that we produce these days, some of them are invisible. Now, we can network and work with a lot of people wherever you are. But of course, we do have a lot of challenges in Africa. The question still remains the same. For example, in Nigeria, with over 200 million people, is still in darkness. We don't really understand what is going on in the country. There is sometimes it looks like there is an experimentation on the Nigerian people to see how much they can take in their experimentation of suffering. So
that's terrible.
It moved from hardship to the worst form of hardship. They are trying to break the spirit of the people. And you will say, this is the end? No. Another end come, you suffer more and more and more and more again, from infrastructure to the culture of the people to the, Dr. Chinua Achebe wrote his book long time ago, Things Fall Apart. That book, I think a lot of Nigerians need to read it. They need to read it to understand what that man was talking about. Slowly, again, we are going back to the game. Those who are manipulating Nigeria are not playing short-term game. If they were playing short-term game, they would have been over a long time ago. But they are playing a long-term game. They have a plan, and they are taking it down one point at a time. That is why it is the way it is. So I think it is for us to look for a way to free ourselves from these shackles. To understand that the guy that is putting sugar on your mouth is not doing it because he loves you. He's doing it so that you can keep quiet, so that you don't talk anymore. And when you don't talk, you soon end up on the table as meat. They will eat you.
Yes.
So it's time that we realize that we need to suffer once and then we'll be free. We need to pay for our freedom with our suffering, but we need to choose that kind of suffering that maybe for the whole of this year, I'm not going to have anything. But after my hunger, I'm going to have food to eat. Now, I'm going to show you another instance. That was 1991 during the Gulf War. I don't know if you were in service that time. Now, what I want to share there is that at that time, I think IBB was still the head of state of Nigeria. Yes, IMF proposed a loan to Nigeria. One of the conditions of the loan for Nigeria, even though Nigeria was making a lot of money from oil because there was no war in Nigeria. I mentioned Gulf War because there was oil produced mainly from the Middle East and also in Africa. So if there is war in the Middle East, meaning that oil production was reduced in the Middle East, there was no war in Nigeria, so they could produce as much oil as they could. But yet, IMF at the same time proposed loan to Nigeria because the Nigeria government then, and head of state, IBB, told the people that they wanted loan to be able, they call it the Structural Adjustment Program. Now, the law is not even the point, but the condition of the law, and by extension, the game that the IMF is playing in Africa, and many of the multinationals are actually playing in Africa, that they are playing a long game and they know what they are doing. They are not making mistake. One of the conditions of the law is that Nigeria was going to open up its economy. And I said, wow, that is interesting. Let's take a look at that. What does it mean, opening up the economy? It means you can make it a kind of a level playing field. Everybody can come in and play, no? I said, cool. But what do I have to play with myself as a Nigerian? There is no light, meaning Nigeria production is zero. If you have nothing to produce, you have these products that are subsidized in Europe. How can you compete? So that was a game that was already rigged from the beginning. But of course, many politicians in Nigeria, we never know. They can never know. But of course, there were some intelligent people at the time who said, no, there was something fishing in this bill. There was fishing in this proposal. A lot of debate was opened up in Nigeria to debate the structural adjustment program, that this was not going to be favorable to the country. What did IBB do? The Nigeria head of state, he went ahead and took the law and he opened up the Nigerian economy. So that until recently, I think even until now, toothpick is imported into Nigeria. Deliberately, there are these laws that they make to cripple the local economy so that importation can be the order of the day in the country. This is a country that, before the discovery of oil, was actually surviving on the basis of agriculture. We have the Kano pyramid. They were so huge, that is why they were referred to as pyramid in Kano. They were producing granite. In the south of the country, they were producing a lot of crop, coconut. They were producing rubber. And rubber, you see, Malaysia came to Nigeria 94. That's in Benin. Again, we are talking about the famous Benin. They came to take seedly palm fruit from Nigeria. Today, Malaysia are some of the highest producers of palm oil. What happened to the source where they took it from Benin? Nothing. They have become the whole thing that grow wind. What is going on? What kind of game are we playing?
Yeah, there will absolutely be challenges with us coming back. Like for something that you're talking about is addressing the leadership, right? You have to be able to question leadership, and you have to do it in a strategic manner, because there's been local African people in Nigeria, and I know personally one in Ghana. I forgot his name. I think it was Muhammad or someone recently that was addressing the corruption of the government and being killed. Right, so you have to be strategic in addressing those types of corruptions, but we also have to call out the leadership that's in cahoots or in bed with Western people that are creating these types of deals that are damaging. So you have that, and then you also have other challenges that will be the cultural differences that may come up, of people not understanding what's going on in let's say the country of Nigeria, where 200 million people don't have lights, right? So people may have discomfort, but there has to be a compromise. Like, people have to be okay with having those types of discomforts and feeling that, because first of all, even though like it is a different type of bondage in and of itself to be deprived of such things, but it also puts you in this survival instinct mode where you will want to create together to develop the solution of it. And I feel like that can come out of people experiencing those things, and it's more than possible. And then also the other challenge is people do have to be okay with death, because a lot of people, because there's stakeholders, there's risk, there's people are invested in the terrorization and suffering of African people, right? Like, people are invested in that. So if people are invested in that, what are they going to do to protect their investment? They will kill, right? So we have to come to terms with that happening and being okay with that, because we're sacrificing ourselves for the next generation. We're preparing, but we have to do it in like a strategic way. So it's sad to say, but that is the reality that we live in. Like, in order for, and I question it sometimes too, because we do put a lot of blame on African leadership, but I question on maybe they do some of these ridiculous deals because their lives are being threatened or their families' lives are being threatened, because sometimes it literally makes no sense. In Ghana, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, they found lithium reserves, and instead of the president making like a strategic deal that helps the economy of Ghana and its people, like job production, because that's huge. There's not enough jobs in Ghana that are available, so they're having a huge brain drain right now. The Ghanaian president just gave most of the access to the lithium reserves to Australian government. It's like, why would you do that, right? Like, even if you are taking their fiat money, why not better your own country? So it just makes you question, like, who is threatening these people? Are they being threatened? Like, and can't be their lives, it must be their family lives. So those are the challenges that we have to cope with and deal with, and we have to do it in a way that I think brings attention to it, like global attention, right? And impact, economic impact, to where the people are paying attention and there's no longer investments are being pulled out by the people because they are socially conscious about who's making these types of decisions, right? And I also think that more international attention to it too will get it to stop. But because people aren't aware, a lot of times people are just traveling and not caring about what's happening in the local politics. That's the problem. But if you're traveling and you're actually learning in the process and like engulfing yourself and immersing yourself in what's happening, I think that's where the change starts to happen and become like, we have to see ourselves as world international citizens and not national citizens. Like, I'm not a citizen of the United States of America. I'm a citizen of the world, right? So that's another type of thing that we have to address as well.
Thank you so much for that. It's a complicated game, but it's a game that we need to understand. I think that the European they want to call themselves strategists, and they play a lot of dirty game, from blackmail to racket to scandal. That they want to give you the position. Of course, we know that the election that they do in Africa, actually they are not an election. They do it so that people can be happy, because so that we don't say that we are having a dictatorship. But we see that it's not an election. We will see the recent one that happened in Nigeria, for example, where somebody will say, even though I lose, I will still be the president. Even though the people say they don't want me, I will still be there. But how do you do that? How do you do a thing like that? I think what happened is that Because now, what many Africans are also seeing is that when we are having these people coming into power, we see them running around in the world, going to US, going to France, going to Germany, as if they are going to sign some document that we are not aware of. Now, after they sign this document, suddenly they become the president or the head of state. They decide signing B in our names, which is sort of in line with what we are already saying, that they're actually employee of the metropole of the European power. They are not really leaders of Africans. Because if they were leaders of Africa, they didn't need to go to France or because they are going to rule their people. Because American government, Obama, because he want to be the president of the United States, we don't need to come and tell the Nigeria, please vote for me. It doesn't need that. I don't think the Italian prime minister need to go and get popular in France before he can be voted in Italy. Italy is right. Italy. You are representing the people of Italy. The people of Italy decide whether they want to vote you in or out. Peter Obi, who is the, they say he lost the election. He said at the time when he was going around also talking with the Nigerians abroad, that they were asking, hey, you need to come and buy a house in the US. You need to come and buy a house here in Chicago. But he was saying, well, I'm not trying to run for office in Chicago. I'm running for office in Nigeria. What do I need a house for in the US? Because that is what our politicians do. They are right there in Africa, but have houses in US, in France, in Germany, in UK, as if maybe they are going to be living there. Now, let's pay attention. Let's take one thing at a time. Now, when you have such investment, somebody is going to use that as a racket against you. Because you have something you don't want to lose. But what if you don't have anything you don't want to lose there? Because they don't have investment in Nigeria other than the fact that they want to protect the one that they have always had, which is the exploitation. So you cannot really hold any British politician or hold him and say, okay, you must do this, because if he doesn't do it, what is going to happen? But what about you? If you don't do it, they will seize your house. They can seize your house in UK. Because you have a house in UK. He doesn't have a house in Lagos. He doesn't have a house in Abuja. So you can see now that they have a way of tying these people together. And of course, these people are playing this game, another man's game, without them knowing the game that they are playing. That you are not supposed to have a resources there if you are going to be here. You should buy your house in Lagos, buy it in Kaduna, so that you will say, if this country collapse, you will collapse with it. If that is the case, you better make sure that you fix it. But if your house is in London, Nigeria can collapse, you fly to London because you have a place to go. So I think we need to also take that into consideration. Now, please tell the people, how can they find this book, this interesting book, so that they can read?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. So again, you guys can find the book Play the Game, Hierarchical Assimilation at my personal website at nkozi-a.com. Again, nkozi-a.com. It's also on Amazon. You can order it from Barnes & Noble, and I think maybe even Walmart. So again, thank you guys so much for listening to our conversation. I hope you guys purchase and enjoy the book.
So now, what would be the final thought today, considering what we have discussed? Okay, we have talked about different things. Of course, this is an argument that I find interesting. So we needed to talk about it, and we did. So how would you conclude it?
My final thoughts for everyone listening is I hope you guys are encouraged and inspired to learn about yourselves, learn more about your identity, and become empowered in who you are. But to no longer play this game and be more inspired and encouraged to work together and figure out what that means for you. If it doesn't mean going back to Africa, like what I want to do, then develop your own community and then safeguard that community, right? Because if you're going to build a community in someone else's territory, at least be able to protect what you're building, right? Because we've had historical records of what happens when we do build our own communities in their territory and it gets bombed and it gets destroyed. So that's my only encouragement. And I hope you guys, when you guys are finding unity with each other, you guys are able to build beautiful social enterprises that helps humanity grow and develop from where we are today. So thank you guys again. And I really appreciate you guys listening.
All right. Thank you so much, Nkozia. I appreciate the conversation. Yeah, it has been really interesting here and inspiring. So I believe that the audience who have listened to us to this point, they have a lot of value from it. Yes, this is a game that we are playing, but we need to know the game, know the rules of the game. And my observation there, I often say, is that there are two ways for us to win this game. Actually, two options. One, of course, talking about Africans. One is that we need to really understand the game that we are playing. This game is a European game. It's not an African game. We need to be sure that we understand that. If we want to win the European game, we need to take the game after we understand it, rewrite the rules according to us. That is one. The second option is that we have different type of games in Africa that we can also play, because we have more history deeper than the European. You need to know that. Don't believe the lies that you are told. Africa have history deeper than the European. You know, when Europe started to come to Africa, they started to come to Egypt, for example, because that is the one that we know better. But of course, they went also to other parts of Africa. They were coming as students. These were the Greeks. They didn't come as masters. They were coming to learn. Now, let me sort of clarify that for you. If today you want to learn something in the world, where would you go? Of course, you will go to Europe, because Europe is the most advanced economy in the world. Okay, I repeat again, by Europe, I'm referring to the West. I'm referring to the Western country, because they are the people that occupy the West. No? They are the most advanced economy technology in the world today. By extension, they also have the best university compared to any other part in the world. So if you want to go to university, where would you go? You will go to Europe, go to European controlled economy. So at the time that the Greeks were coming to Africa, Africa was also the most advanced in terms of technology, information, education, spirituality, anything you can think about. So that is why they came to study in Africa. So we as Africans have a deeper history than the European, the one that we can even read, but there are ones that were not recorded. Even that too is deeper. So yes, we need to understand that we have games that we can also play in Africa. But mark you, there is a consequence for that. Either when you want to play that game, be ready to pay the price. Because nothing in this world goes for nothing. There is a price for everything. But there is something that I'm thinking about that. Because a lot of us are afraid that, they will kill us. Of course, they will kill some of us. That is the price we need to pay. But Europe, as far as I can see, do not have the plan of invading Africa because we want to be free. They will lose if we choose to be free, yes. They will threaten us, yes. They will kill some of us, yes. But they will eventually let us go. That is the human nature. But they will never let us go if we don't fight for our right. That too is part of the human nature. So if we as a people want to be free, we need to stand our ground, but be prepared to die too. If we are not prepared to die, then we can't get freedom. Because freedom is not something that you sign on a contract. Anyway, I think I've spoken enough there. Thank you so much, sister.
Thank you so much.